William now assumes the Scottish titles.
Prince of Wales, pledge my loyalty to you, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, as your liege man of life and limb. So help me God.
For months, Camilla operated as the unofficial gatekeeper of the monarchy. She managed sovereign estates and controlled access to an ailing monarch. But as health battles mount behind palace walls, Charles made a ruthless, unexpected choice to protect his legacy. With one stroke of a pen, the Queen Consort was pushed to the sidelines. The Prince of Wales stepped into an unprecedented shadow regency. Was this a desperate move forced by worsening medical reports? Or was it a cold, calculated betrayal to secure the throne for his son before time runs out? The answers hidden inside Buckingham Palace will change everything you thought you knew about the royal family. A broken tradition in the shadows of Highgrove. The tension inside the sovereign estate has reached a boiling point. For centuries, the inner workings of the crown relied on absolute trust. A monarch ruled with their consort by their side. They shared decisions and the heavy burdens of state business. That unbroken tradition has just crumbled. It started behind the tall stone walls of Highgrove House. The grand estate in Gloucestershire seemed calm on the outside. Sunlight hit the ancient gardens. The surrounding fields looked untouched by the storms of world politics. But inside the private study, the mood was heavy and grim. King Charles sat at his wooden desk. He looked deeply exhausted. The relentless cancer treatments had taken a visible physical toll. His body was thinner, his face carried deep lines of pain and sleepless nights. Yet his eyes remained focused on one singular duty. He had to ensure the absolute survival of the crown. Sitting across from him was Prince William. The Prince of Wales did not come for a casual family visit. He arrived with private legal counsel and senior royal advisors. The air inside the room was thick with tension. Between them on the polished desk lay a thick binder bound in red leather. Inside that binder was a document titled Constitutional Delegation of Executive Sovereign Authority. It was not a public bill or debated in the House of Commons. It was an internal crown prerogative. It was designed to bypass public scrutiny while completely reordering the balance of power within the royal household. For the past 14 months, Queen Camilla had expanded her influence across the royal firm. When Charles was forced to reduce his public appearances, Camilla stepped into the breach. She did not just represent the monarch at ceremonial functions. Rather, she moved into the realm of real executive power. Camilla began reviewing key administrative orders regarding the Duchy of Lancaster. She sat in on high-level security briefings. She signed off on sovereign estate expenditures. Most importantly, she gained total control over access to the king. To many court officials, Camilla had become the de facto ruler of daily palace operations. She was the shield protecting a weakened king. She decided who could see him and which state documents reached his desk. She determined how long he spent on official paperwork before returning to rest. To Prince William, however, that dynamic was deeply dangerous. William watched the shift from Kensington Palace with growing alarm. He saw an institutional risk unfolding in real time. Decisions regarding the long-term future of the monarchy were being made without his knowledge. He worried about the public perception of the crown. He feared that a non-blood royal was wielding executive influence that belonged strictly to the direct lineage of Windsor. The rift between William and Camilla has existed for decades. It is a deep, historical scar that time never truly healed. William remembered the pain of his childhood and the shadow Camilla cast over his mother, Princess Diana. He accepted Camilla as his father's wife out of duty. He supported her public elevation to Queen Consort for the sake of royal stability. But accepting her as a stepmother was very different from allowing her to control the executive levers of the monarchy. When private health reports indicated that the king needed extended periods of medical rest, the silent struggle for control reached its climax. Camilla believed she was acting in her husband's best interest. She wanted to spare him the crushing stress of daily governance. She wanted to manage the sovereign affairs herself, relying on a small circle of trusted advisors. William viewed the situation through a very different lens. He saw a monarch who was being systematically isolated, and an administrative vacuum at the highest level of state. During that secret gathering at Highgrove, William made his position unmistakable. He presented a clear, uncompromising argument to his father. The reign of King Charles had to remain strong and unquestioned. If the king could not handle daily state duties, those duties could not be delegated to a consort. They had to be handed to the heir apparent. The legal document was drafted with surgical precision. It did not strip Camilla of her title. She remains the queen consort. She still attends state dinners and wears the royal jewels. She still stands beside her husband on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. To the outside world, nothing appears to have changed. Behind closed doors, however, everything has changed. The decree legally revokes Camilla's authority to sign off on administrative crown documents. It removes her from oversight of sovereign financial allocations. It terminates her ability to manage access to the king's official red boxes containing classified government papers. Those exact powers have now been transferred to Prince William. Under the provisions of this shadow regency, William now holds primary signing authority over royal patents. He oversees decisions regarding the royal estates. He sits in private briefings with the cabinet secretary and senior military officials. William is effectively running the day-to-day operations of the British monarchy. When Queen Camilla learned of the signed decree, the reaction inside Windsor Castle was immediate and severe. Insiders describe an atmosphere of cold shock. Camilla felt completely blindsided. She had spent 20 years rebuilding her public image. She had worked endlessly to transition from the most disliked woman in Britain to a respected queen consort. She believed she had earned her place at the center of power, and that she had earned her husband's total trust. To find herself suddenly excluded from executive governance felt like a devastating humiliation. It was a stark, brutal reminder that inside the royal family, bloodline always triumphs over marriage. Charles found himself caught in an agonizing personal dilemma. He loves his wife. She has been his companion and his emotional anchor for decades. But Charles is also a monarch who spent 73 years preparing to wear the crown. He knows that his legacy will not be judged by how well he protected his wife's feelings. It will be judged by how well he preserved the throne for his son and grandson. The king knew his strength was fading faster than the official press releases admitted. He could not afford a constitutional crisis. He could not leave the crown vulnerable to internal power struggles while he fought a life-threatening illness. He made the ultimate sacrifice of personal devotion for institutional survival. He signed the paper and handed the pen to William, and in doing so, he effectively ended Camilla's reign as the power behind the throne. Now, a new era has begun in total secrecy. Prince William has stepped into the shadows of absolute authority. He is making the decisions, directing the palace staff, and shaping the future of the House of Windsor. Camilla remains in the public eye, smiling for the cameras, playing her part with perfected grace. But behind that smile lies a profound betrayal that can never be undone. The legal strike that stripped Camilla's shield. It was not a noisy public announcement. There were no fanfare trumpets at the gates of Buckingham Palace. There were no urgent prime ministerial press conferences outside 10 Downing Street. Instead, it was a silent pen stroke across thick vellum parchment that stripped the queen consort of her ultimate bargaining chip. The monarchy operates on ancient precedents and complex statutes. Power in the royal household is governed by two distinct frameworks. There is the public constitutional framework, which involves Parliament and the Prime Minister. Then there is the private administrative prerogative. For decades, royal consorts maintained an informal role in managing the monarch's domestic and executive office. When Queen Elizabeth II ruled, Prince Philip managed the royal private estates. He oversaw Balmoral and Sandringham. He dictated household policy. But Prince Philip never sought to regulate state business or control access to official government dispatches. When Charles became king, the dynamic shifted dramatically. The king brought Camilla into the absolute center of his daily governance. As his health challenges mounted over the past year, Camilla gradually expanded that role into an administrative fortress. She did not just arrange scheduled appointments, she began filtering which court officials could speak directly to the monarch. Camilla began reviewing preliminary briefs on duchy property holdings. She started giving directives to senior private secretaries regarding royal expenditures. To those working inside Buckingham Palace, Camilla was no longer just the king's wife. She had become the principal shield of the reign. She argued that her actions were motivated entirely by love and devotion. She wanted to preserve the king's energy and shield him from stress during difficult medical treatments. She believed that by managing the administrative heavy lifting, she was keeping the monarchy running smoothly. However, inside Kensington Palace, Prince William saw a dangerous precedent forming. William understood the law better than most realized. Under the Councillors of State provisions, legal proxy authority is strictly defined. Councillors of State are designated to act on behalf of the monarch during temporary absence or illness. By law, those positions belong to the sovereign's spouse and the next 4 adult royals in the line of succession. In recent years, Parliament had expanded that pool to include Princess Anne and Prince Edward. This was done specifically to bypass non-working royals, but Camilla remained a primary councillor of state. As the king's health fluctuated, Camilla began using her position as spouse to sign emergency crown authorizations. She was acting as a primary operational proxy without formal parliamentary designation as regent. William recognized that this created a profound constitutional vulnerability. If decisions regarding royal assets, sovereign appointments, or state documents were signed or directed by a queen consort without direct blood succession authority, those decisions could be challenged. Traditionalists in the legal establishment began whispering warnings to Kensington Palace. William took those warnings directly to top legal minds in the Chancery Division. Together with private legal counselors, William mapped out a legal instrument. They used an ancient legal mechanism known as the Crown Prerogative Instrument of Internal Delegation. This mechanism allows the ruling sovereign to issue a binding, irrevocable directive regarding internal executive administration. It does not require parliamentary approval because it does not alter the head of state. Instead, it reassigns all operational delegation away from the consort and directly to the heir apparent. The legal instrument contained 3 crucial clauses that effectively disarmed Camilla's administrative empire. First, it explicitly stripped the queen consort of any oversight regarding the red boxes. For generations, the red leather dispatches have contained classified cabinet documents, intelligence summaries, and royal assent papers. Camilla had previously managed the intake and order of these papers during the king's recovery periods. The new decree mandates that only Prince William, as heir apparent, may review, sort, or present state dispatches to the king when the monarch is in medical seclusion. Second, the document severed Camilla's authority over sovereign property and financial distribution. She could no longer issue directives regarding the Duchy of Lancaster or authorize capital allocation for royal estate management. That power was placed squarely under the control of William and his administrative team. Third, and perhaps most devastatingly, the legal decree transferred total control of the sovereign's private schedule to the Prince of Wales. Camilla could no longer decide who gained access to the king for official business. Prime ministers, foreign ambassadors, and senior palace officials would now coordinate access strictly through Prince William's private secretary. When the legal strike was executed at Highgrove, it was done with absolute chilling precision. The document was presented to King Charles alongside a confidential legal memorandum signed by top constitutional attorneys. The memorandum made one truth devastatingly clear. If the king became unable to fulfill daily duties for extended periods, the monarchy could face a constitutional nightmare unless executive authority was formally consolidated under Prince William. Charles read the legal memorandum in total silence. He knew the implications. He knew that signing the decree meant stripping his wife of the authority she had built over the last 2 years. He knew it would wound her pride deeply and recreate the painful power dynamics that had plagued the royal household for generations. Yet, the king also recognized the brutal institutional logic behind his son's demand. Charles could not leave the monarchy vulnerable. He could not allow a power struggle to erupt between Kensington Palace and Clarence House while he fought a critical health battle. With a steady hand, Charles signed his name at the bottom of the vellum document. The legal stroke was finalized. In a matter of minutes, the informal power structure that Camilla had spent 2 years assembling was completely disassembled. When news of the signed decree reached Camilla's private office at Windsor Castle, the reaction was immediate outrage. Staff members describe a moment of absolute shock. Camilla had been holding meetings with senior advisors just hours earlier, planning upcoming estate itineraries and reviewing household budgets. Suddenly, she was informed that her administrative signatures were no longer valid. She was told that all future administrative directives must be routed through Kensington Palace for Prince William's personal approval. For Camilla, this was not just a legal rearrangement. It was a public and private humiliation. She felt that her devotion to her husband was being weaponized against her. She had stepped forward to carry the burden when the king was sick, only to be cast aside as an institutional threat the moment things became difficult. She demanded to speak with Charles immediately. But when she arrived at his private quarters, she discovered that the door was guarded by a new reality. The king was resting under medical supervision, and the person authorized to grant permission for visits was no longer her private secretary. It was Prince William. The legal strike was complete. The Queen Consort had been stripped of her operational shield. Prince William had drawn a clear, unyielding line in the sand. The Shadow Regency was no longer a theoretical debate. It was an active legal reality. And as the sun set over the towers of Windsor, the true magnitude of William's silent victory began to set in across every corner of the royal family. Prince William steps into the Shadow Regency. The shift in power was immediate. It was decisive. Prince William did not hesitate for a single second. He stepped into the gap. He took control of the daily operation. Kensington Palace became the new center of royal authority. For months, advisors had debated the future. They argued in private rooms and wondered how to manage the king's illness. Now, the debate was over. The decree was active. The Prince of Wales held the reins. His first action was swift. He summoned the chief court officials. He met with senior private secretaries and called the keepers of the privy purse into an emergency briefing. The message was simple. The crown was stabilizing. The chain of command was clear. William made his expectations known. All operational decisions had to pass through his desk. No orders were to be issued by royal consorts. No official papers were to bypass his team. Staff members felt the sudden shift. The old court routines vanished overnight. Camilla's administrative influence was gone. Her senior aides were informed of the change. They were told to align with Kensington Palace. All internal memos required William's personal approval. William brought a modern approach to the Shadow Regency. He did not want slow, outdated palace politics. He wanted efficiency, discipline, and total clarity. He began reviewing the sovereign estate portfolios. He looked deep into the finances of the Duchy of Lancaster. He examined every major capital expenditure. Under Camilla's brief oversight, project approvals were informal. They relied on traditional court favors. William stopped that process completely. He implemented strict modern governance. He brought in independent financial auditors. He established direct accountability. Every pound spent had to serve the long-term survival of the monarchy. The contrast between William and Camilla was total. Camilla operated through traditional court influence. She relied on personal relationships and governed with soft power behind closed doors. William operated like a modern chief executive officer. He was direct, structured, and unsentimental. He did not care about hurt feelings among long-serving courtiers. He cared about public trust. He cared about stability and the preservation of the royal line. Court officials were stunned by his speed. He moved from project to project with absolute resolve. He reshaped the daily schedules. He reorganized cabinet briefing protocols. Every morning at 8 o'clock, William received the official government red boxes. He reviewed the state files himself. He selected which documents required the king's personal signature. He handled the rest through delegated authority. The king was kept informed, but he was spared the exhausting routine of minor paperwork. William protected his father's remaining energy. He made sure Charles only handled essential constitutional matters. Everything else was managed by the Shadow Regency. This created a major power shift within palace walls. Aides who had previously aligned with Queen Camilla found tennis courts and office access stripped. Their access to the inner circle was severed. They were no longer invited to morning strategy sessions. Power moved away from Clarence House. Power moved away from the Queen's private quarters. It flowed directly to Kensington Palace. William established a small, tight circle of trusted advisors. He relied on former military officers and brought in top constitutional experts. He hired modern communications directors. This inner core operated with military precision. Leaks were strictly forbidden. Loose talk was punished with instant removal. The environment inside the palace changed completely. The mood became sharp, focused, and urgent. Prince William knew the stakes were high. The public was watching the king's health battle. Foreign governments were monitoring the situation. Any sign of weakness inside the royal household could damage the institution. William determined that there would be no weakness. He stepped into public engagements with renewed authority. He led diplomatic receptions. He held private audiences with visiting foreign heads of state. He represented the king at national security briefings. When observers saw William at these events, they saw more than an heir apparent. They saw a sovereign in waiting, already exercising executive authority. The public reaction began to shift. People saw strength in William's leadership. They saw a steady hand during a period of national uncertainty. Inside the palace, however, the human cost was rising. Camilla watched William's rapid takeover with deep resentment. She saw her former offices emptied of influence and her trusted staff reassigned or silenced. She tried to arrange private meetings with senior government ministers, but ministers politely declined. They knew the new rules. They knew that state business was now conducted exclusively through Prince William. Camilla was isolated within her own home. She still had her royal title and public role. She still had her royal security detail, but her real authority had vanished into thin air. She felt like a prisoner of royal protocol. Meanwhile, William pushed forward without delay. He began planning for the long-term future of the House of Windsor. He reviewed the royal property portfolio. He targeted underutilized royal residences for consolidation. He wanted to reduce the financial burden on the British taxpayer. He knew that the modern public demanded value and transparency. He wanted to enter the next reign with a clean, efficient institutional structure. His decisions were cold and calculated. He cut funding for secondary royal programs. He redirected resources toward high-impact public initiatives. Every move was calculated to protect the monarchy's future. King Charles watched his son's decisive actions from his private rooms. The king felt mixed emotions. On one hand, Charles felt deep pride. He saw his son taking control with authority and skill. He knew the throne would be safe in William's hands. On the other hand, Charles felt severe guilt. He saw the pain in his wife's eyes. He saw the cold silence that now existed between Camilla and William. The royal household had become a battlefield of silent glances and closed doors. Charles had built his life around two pillars, his duty to the crown and his love for Camilla. Now, those two pillars were in direct conflict. By signing the decree, Charles had chosen duty over love. He had chosen his son over his wife. The shadow regency was fully established. William held absolute control over the operational machinery of the British state. He had disarmed his stepmother's influence. He had built the royal estates and secured the chain of command. But the final confrontation was yet to come. As the shadow regency grew stronger, the tension inside Windsor Castle reached an absolute breaking point. A quiet war had been fought with pens and legal documents. Now, the conflict was about to erupt face to face. William had taken power, but Camilla was not going to vanish into the background without a fight. The stage was set for a dramatic midnight confrontation that would test the bonds of the royal family to their ultimate limit. Midnight at Windsor. The Queen's confrontation. The clock struck midnight. Windsor Castle was shrouded in darkness. Rain washed over the heavy stone walls. Inside the private apartments, the air was thick with tension. The quiet war had reached its climax. Queen Camilla stood by the grand fireplace. Her face was pale. Her eyes burned with anger and hurt. Across the room stood Prince William. He was calm, posture straight, looking at her with cold resolve. King Charles sat in a velvet armchair between them. He looked fragile and looked caught between two worlds. Camilla held a copy of the signed decree in her trembling hands. She raised it toward the king. She asked a single, devastating question. How could Charles do this after everything she had sacrificed for him? For 20 years, she had stood by his side. She faced public hatred and brutal tabloid media attacks. She rebuilt her reputation piece by piece. She did it all for him. Now, she was being pushed aside. She was treated like an outsider in her own home. What secret lever did Camilla threaten to use in that moment to challenge William's authority? And would Charles break under the emotional pressure of his wife's tears? Camilla directed her anger at Prince William. She accused him of executing a silent coup. She accused him of exploiting his father's illness for personal power. She reminded him of the past. She reminded him that she had supported his elevation. She had protected the king so William could focus on his own young family. William did not flinch. His response was swift and ice cold. He told her that this was not personal. It was institutional. He explained that the monarchy cannot be managed like a private family estate. The crown belongs to the British people. It belongs to the direct line of blood succession. William looked his stepmother in the eye. He stated that her role was consort, not monarch. He made it clear that her administrative intervention created systemic risk. It created legal doubt. It threatened the credibility of the future reign. He told her that he was not taking power for himself. He was protecting the throne for his father, for himself, and for Prince George. Camilla refused to step down easily. She turned to King Charles. She made an emotional plea to her husband. She reminded Charles of their long history and the promises he made when they married. She asked him if he was truly willing to strip her of all respect inside the palace. Charles looked down at the floor. His hands were clasped together. The emotional strain was visible on his face. He loved Camilla deeply. She had been his sanctuary during his darkest years. She had given him comfort when the world criticized him. But Charles was also the king. He knew William was right about the law. He knew the shadow regency was necessary to keep the state stable. Charles finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but firm. He told Camilla that the decision was final. He told her that he had signed the document with a heavy heart, but with a clear mind. He explained that his duty as king superseded his feelings as a husband. He asked her to accept the new arrangement. He asked her to preserve the public image of unity. The reaction was immediate. Camilla felt a profound sense of betrayal. The man she had protected had surrendered to his son. Was there a hidden clause inside the decree that Camilla did not see coming? A clause that limited her public appearances if she refused to cooperate? Camilla realized the reality of her position. She had lost the legal battle. She had lost the administrative battle. She was surrounded by William's security teams and William's chosen staff. The traditional court influence she relied on had evaporated. William stepped forward. He outlined the rules of the new structure. Camilla would retain her official titles. She would retain her personal staff for public engagements. She would continue to represent the crown at charitable events. However, all administrative access was terminated. She would no longer receive cabinet updates. She would no longer oversee estate operations. She would no longer decide the king's daily working hours. Her schedule would be managed by Kensington Palace. If she attempted to bypass this chain of command, William warned that her private office budget would be frozen immediately. The line was drawn. The power shift was absolute. Camilla looked at Prince William. She saw the ghost of Princess Diana in his eyes. She saw the unyielding determination of a young leader ready to rule without compromise. She knew the fight was over. She placed the paper on the table and turned away without saying another word. She walked out of the room, closing the heavy wooden door behind her. The room fell silent. King Charles looked at his heir. The quiet conflict that had threatened to split the family was resolved. The transition of executive authority was complete. William stood beside his father. He assured the king that the monarchy was secure. He promised to carry the burden so Charles could focus entirely on his health. The shadow regency was no longer hidden in legal drafts. It had survived its hardest emotional test. Prince William had taken control of the British monarchy. He had disarmed the Queen Consort. He had protected the lineage of Windsor. And as the night ended over Windsor Castle, the House of Windsor entered a new chapter of cold, modern reality. The sovereign's final mandate and the palace alliance. The confrontation at Windsor Castle was over, but the work was just beginning. Prince William did not celebrate his victory. He knew that raw legal power was not enough to stabilize the monarchy. He needed an ironclad alliance within the royal family itself. He needed to ensure that no faction inside the palace could ever challenge the shadow regency. In the days following the midnight meeting, William set out to build a powerful core of support. He turned to the two most respected and hard-working members of the royal family, Princess Anne and Prince Edward. Princess Anne had long been considered the unsung backbone of the House of Windsor. She possessed a legendary work ethic. She had zero patience for palace politics or emotional drama. When William met privately with his aunt at Gatcombe Park, he laid out the full reality of the situation. He explained the legal decree. He detailed the necessity of isolating state business from private domestic influence. Princess Anne did not hesitate. She had watched Camilla's growing influence with quiet concern. Anne understood that the survival of the dynasty depended on absolute clarity of succession. She agreed to stand fully behind Prince William. Princess Anne pledged her complete support to the new operational command. She agreed to take on additional senior representational duties. This move allowed King Charles to rest while ensuring the crown maintained an unbroken presence across the United Kingdom. Prince Edward soon joined the alliance. As the Duke of Edinburgh, Edward brought a calming presence and total loyalty to the bloodline. With Anne and Edward standing firmly beside William, a new triumvirate of royal power was established. This silent alliance sent an unmistakable signal throughout the entire palace network. The senior working royals were united behind the Prince of Wales. Any attempt by Camilla's former allies to create division was completely crushed before it could begin. What unexpected move did Princess Anne make during a private meeting with top palace aides that silenced all lingering opposition? Anne summoned the private secretaries of all royal households to a mandatory briefing at St. James's Palace. She stood before the gathered court officials. Her message was direct and uncompromising. She informed them that the reign was operating under unified executive direction. She made it clear that any aide who attempted to play Clarence House against Kensington Palace would be dismissed from royal service immediately. The palace bureaucracy fell into line overnight. With his internal alliance secured, William returned to Highgrove for a private, one-on-one meeting with his father. The Shadow Regency was legally active and operationally backed, but one vital element remained unresolved. King Charles was ready to hand over daily authority. However, he had one final, non-negotiable condition. The king sat across from his son in the library. Charles looked at William not just as a monarch looking at his heir, but as a father looking at the future king. Charles spoke with deep emotion. He explained that his entire life had been defined by service to the nation. He wanted his final years to reflect dignity, unity, and peace. His condition was simple, yet profound. Charles demanded that William give a solemn royal oath regarding the dignity of the king's public standing. The king required that under no circumstances should the public ever perceive Charles as a deposed or helpless monarch. The transition of operational power had to remain completely invisible to the general public. Charles insisted that he must continue to appear as the reigning sovereign at major state ceremonies. He would continue to attend Trooping the Color. He would continue to open Parliament when healthy. He would continue to appear on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. William was instructed to manage the state apparatus from the shadows without ever undermining the public majesty of his father's reign. Furthermore, Charles made William swear an oath regarding Prince George. The king insisted that while William managed the heavy demands of the state, he must never sacrifice the childhood of young Prince George. Charles remembered the rigid isolation of his own upbringing. He wanted to ensure that the future King George VII was given the time, love, and protection needed to grow into his future role. Prince William looked into his father's eyes. He felt the immense weight of the moment. He understood his father's heart. He recognized that Charles was asking for dignity in his remaining time on the throne. William gave his father his solemn word. He swore to honor the pact completely. He promised that the public would only see a strong, beloved King Charles leading the nation. And he promised to protect Prince George from the overwhelming burdens of the state until the proper time arrived. King Charles leaned back in his chair. A profound look of relief washed over his face. The final condition was met. The sovereign's last mandate was sealed with an oath between father and son. With the alliance secured and the oath given, the entire structure of the British monarchy was fundamentally transformed. Queen Camilla recognized that her time as the operational power behind the throne was over. She accepted her streamlined role. She focused her energy on her charitable patronages and her public duties alongside the king. She appeared at official events, perfectly groomed, composed, and smiling. But behind the scenes, her influence over state papers, estate budgets, and access to the king was completely gone. The power structure had settled into its new reality. Prince William now held absolute administrative control over the royal estates, the sovereign grant, and the execution of state business. He operated with the full backing of Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and the top legal authorities of the realm. He had protected his father's public dignity and secured his son's future. And he had proven that, when the survival of the House of Windsor was on the line, he possessed the strength and resolve to rule. The Shadow Regency was complete. The crown was safe. The reign transformed. The quiet revolution within the House of Windsor is now complete. What began as a silent struggle in the halls of Highgrove has redefined the future of the British monarchy. The balance of power did not shift through public rebellion. It shifted through legal discipline, institutional strategy, and an unyielding commitment to the bloodline. Queen Camilla remains a figure of public grace. She attends ceremonial luncheons and waves from royal carriages. She stands beside King Charles during official appearances. To the untrained eye, nothing has broken. The public sees a united front. They see a steady, traditional reign. But behind the velvet curtains, the dynamic is entirely transformed. Camilla no longer holds the operational keys to the crown. Her influence over sovereign property decisions is gone. Her control over state documents is severed. Her role as the gatekeeper to the monarch has been replaced by the structured command of Prince William. She has accepted her position because she had no other choice. The legal decree sealed her operational defeat. The palace alliance between William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward locked every remaining door. For Prince William, the Shadow Regency is not about personal glory. It is about cold, relentless institutional preservation. He has taken the reins of state business to safeguard the throne during a fragile historical moment. He has streamlined royal spending and modernized executive protocols. He has ensured that when his own reign officially begins, the monarchy will be stronger, leaner, and fully prepared for the modern world. King Charles can now focus his remaining energy on his health and his symbolic duties. He has protected his personal dignity. He has honored his sacred oath to the nation. And he has watched his heir step up with absolute strength. The British monarchy has survived countless historical storms over centuries of rule. It has endured civil wars, foreign conflicts, and internal scandals. Yet this quiet transition of authority will be remembered as one of its most decisive moments. Without firing a single shot or causing a public crisis, Prince William disarmed a silent threat, secured the royal succession, and assumed the executive authority of the crown. The Shadow Regency is active, the line of succession is unbreakable, and the House of Windsor has stepped into a bold, formidable new era. Prince William has executed one of the most remarkable legal maneuvers in modern royal history. By stepping into the Shadow Regency, he protected his father's dignity while ensuring the absolute survival of the British crown. Queen Camilla played her part with power and influence, but in the end, the unyielding law of bloodline succession prevailed. The House of Windsor stands transformed, guided by a steady and calculated heir who is ready to lead. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you believe King Charles made the right decision by handing total executive authority to Prince William? Was stripping Queen Camilla of her administrative influence a harsh betrayal or a necessary legal move to save the monarchy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden power dynamics of the royal family, hit the like button right now. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications so you never miss another high-stakes royal investigation. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.